This next segment, focusing on the development of Greek culture and Western civilization, is going to take us into the Greece that we knew before. This was the one that was disunited, that was experimenting with various forms of democracy and other governments, that in many ways, even though they share the same culture and the same geography and ideas in a very confined space, find ways to continue to be differentiated from each other and mutually hostile as they combined and recombined in various military alliances against each other. Now, the Persians, and they had come in from the outside, had been sort of a way in which for the Greeks to organize, right? A mutual distrust and dislike of an outside enemy. They found common cause as Greeks to fight against the Persians. Now, not all Greek city-states did that. Some stayed neutral, some even participated and assisted the Persians in various ways, but most Greek city-states that had significant military power did actively try to destroy and push the Persians out. But once the Persian threat is removed, right, after the losses of the year 480 and 479, the Greeks are going to go back to a mutual hostility, we'll call it. Athens and Sparta are going to be the two key leaders, along with other Greek city-states. They're going to be the key leaders in these new alliance systems, aimed at each other, undermining each other militarily or politically or in any other means possible. In other words, the old animosity, the old hatred between the Greek city-states did not go away. And you'll see this in your text reading. It's going to be now that the Athenians are going to be trying to dominate certain city-states. The Persians are going to be on the outside of this, looking in, and the Spartans are going to be working with their allies to resist what they see as Athenian power grabs. So what we're going to think about here is that the old distrust between Sparta and Athens, which was kind of papered over for the Persian Wars, is now broken loose again. All right? There is no cooperation between the two. So one of the key elements to think about here is that, remember, Athenian success in the time period of the Persian Wars had been to go to sea. Now, Athens has been for the longest time a trade depot, a trade city. Their focus is on long-distance and short-distance trade and the profits that come with that as they sent their ships all around the Mediterranean and other areas. Spartan, as you know, Spartan polis had in many ways just focused on itself, kept a very stable system, a very military-dominated system, and wasn't particularly interested in innovations. If you're looking for innovations, go to Athens. If you're looking for stability, go to Sparta. But what's going to happen now is the Athenians, all right, they had created a series of allies, and they had created a series of allies, and they had a headquarters at an island called Delos, which is a relatively small island in the Aegean. But the group of people, the Greek city-states that decided to come together and continue to be at war with the Persians, have their headquarters at this island called Delos. They're called the Delian League, all right? Now, what happens is this. Athens was the biggest, baddest polis on the block in terms of that alliance. They started to manipulate and dominate other city-states inside that alliance, increasingly demanding tax revenue and other payments from the individual city-states that would go to Athens. Earlier, when you saw the Acropolis in Athens with the remnants of that giant Parthenon, that giant temple to Athena, that was built largely with money that had been extorted from the Delian League. Remember, Athens had been totally trashed, and now Pericles, the leader of Athens, is going to take a lot of that and use that money to aggrandize Athens. Athens is essentially, from our perspective, becoming an imperialist power, using its influence, its military control, and essentially its brutal control over its neighbors to build up a larger empire, and in essence, are creating more enemies the more harshly they treat their supposed allies. So as the Athenians are expanding their control, they're actually in many ways creating and undermining it in the sense that all the people that they're pushing hard for revenue are the very same people who would rebel or potentially look to the Spartans for assistance. After a series of missteps, miscommunications, and outright problems between Sparta and Athens and each of their allies, we eventually break into what's going to be called the Peloponnesian War. And this is the big one. This is the big showdown. This is going to be a long-lasting, sort of knockdown, drag-out struggle with Athens and its allies against the Spartans. What will be interesting then is, remember, in the old ethos, the old ideas of Homer, a man is about his duty and his honor and his respect and judgment, his justice, right? We saw that and heard about that before. Well, now Athens is in the process of essentially creating democracy on the back of imperialism and slavery. And so we got to be careful when we think about Athenian democracy, as we think about what they're trying to do and going into the war with Sparta. It would be easy for us to say, well, look, here's this wonderful democratic state being created. Time out. We got to think about that for a second. Remember, this society, along with many of the others, is based on a form of slavery that usually has massive numbers of people in bondage for very simple purposes, agricultural production or otherwise, while the citizens of these individual places have an exalted kind of existence above and beyond that. So we got to keep that in context. Athens is the one that we know now. Athens is the state of Pericles. Pericles is sort of the elected general, called the Greek name is strategai, right? It is a strategic guy, a military man. He is annually reelected to this office. He is from the elite class, but he has earned the reputation as building the political power of the common man, the common citizen. It's going to be under Pericles that they're going to work on this idea of how to continue the war against Sparta. And it's also under Pericles that he's going to try and kind of fine-tune some of the ideas of democracy, opening it up for more people, right? Clisthenes had been the thinker in Athens after Solon. He had brought in this idea of representative democracy of various kinds, of breaking up the old Athenian elite and having people elect people to serve by lot on various committees in government. In other words, a way of empowering all citizens. Pericles is going to make that happen even more, as he insists, for example, on the payment of people to serve on juries if that's necessary. In other words, real democracy is the idea that people have not just the legal opportunity to participate, but actually can economically and otherwise. To take somebody who, for example, is a day laborer, who lives day by day and what he can do in the streets in terms of hiring himself out, to take a citizen like that and put him on a jury, no offense, would be a death sentence, because they could not earn a living. Pericles is dealing with that kind of issue as he's trying to broaden the idea that all men who have been born in Athens over age 18 can participate and should participate in government. Not just soldiers, but everyone. Now, as we had seen before, Athens had become a city of the sea. It had built walls connecting itself to the ocean, and it was a trade depot. Sparta is a landed military state. Sparta is going to do that continually. Athens is going to be that naval power, that state that is going to exist on the basis of how many ships they can send out, how many crews they can send out, and how much trade they can conduct. So when the Peloponnesian War breaks out in 431, the strategy is simply this. Athens is going to come and sit inside its walls, continue to do all the business by the ocean trade that they have. The Spartans do not have the military power to control all the territory of Greece, and they can't break the walls of Athens. So even though the Spartans control all the land, the Athenians will control all the sea. One way to think of this is the idea that this is recreating the Athenian success against the Persians, right? This strategy to deal with this possibility that they do not believe they could ever win a land war against Sparta and its neighbors and its allies, so don't even try, go to sea. But the hyperconcentration of population, people brought in from the countryside into the city, there's a major outbreak of a plague. And by 429, it kills Pericles, as well as about a third of the population of Athens. So the initial strategy sounded nice, but now the reality is that the hyperconcentration of people from the countryside into the city with all kinds of sanitation and food delivery issues and clean water has led to a major plague. So Athens sees its strength sapped. And Pericles, the leader of the strategy and the most sort of intelligent political and military thinker of the time in Athens, is now dead, and the Athenians have to find the right kind of leadership and the right kind of plan. There's many different people who try to create different strategies for Athens to be successful, but as the war continues, and it does from 431 down to 404, increasingly Athens makes a series of mistakes, and they end up losing. By 404, the Spartans have been successful, them and their allies, and they now are the masters of Athens. Athenian democracy is no longer, it is dead. The Spartans are in control through their allies. And now this vibrant city-state, this vibrant polis, that in many ways was the leading figure in the Athenian or in the Greek movement towards creating ideas for Western civilization, it's now under essentially military occupation and the rule of outsiders. Right? So this epic time period, the Peloponnesian War, take a look through your readings in terms of the section about the Peloponnesian War, get a basic sense of all the ideas and concepts here, and recognize that this is sort of the end of Athenian military independence, and it looks to be the triumph of Sparta as a military power. Double check that all your book, and make sure you take a look at your sample questions.